Hello, everybody, and welcome to WCS America Premier League Season 2, Day 2. Yes, that's right. We're already in our second day. Today is Wednesday, the 21st of May in 2014, and I'm, of course, Ken van der Kooi, also known as Rotterdam. And with me is still Nate. I'm so glad you didn't leave me yet. Nathanius Fabricant, Nathanius TV Fabricant. How are you doing, Nate?
I'm doing great, Roddy. We had a great day of games, and I'm especially looking forward to today's group. Lots of Terran players, and how much I love my Terran.
Yeah, you were a little bit of a sad puppy yesterday, and like I was talking to Nate as well on the way home. I was like, Nate, you're so quiet. What went wrong today? He's like, well, there were just no Terrans, but look at this bracket today, guys. We got some of the best Terran players in the world. Even one of my favorite Terrans, or once upon a time at least, he was one of the best. But I think he still is. Bomber is going to kick things off today against the Canadian underdog, I would say, MaSa. And later on today as well, we're going to have Crank versus Nesty. Nate, so many storylines in this little bracket already as well. Let's just take it from the top. Bomber.
I mean, what needs to be said, of course, one of the most prolific Terran players we've seen in the history of StarCraft, had a great, successful career in Wings of Liberty, took the Season 2 Finals Championship last year's WCS, and coming off a pretty good run that he had at the Lone Star Clash, he's looking to get a bit more success in WCS. Didn't get too far last season once he hit round of 16.
It's funny when you look at season 1 and you see Bomber made it into the round of 8, so the quarterfinals, the entire thing, got a reasonable paycheck, added some WCS points. But we look at that season and we say like, hey, this was kind of a disappointing performance of Bomber. That's just, we hold him to very high standards. Bomber was top 4 at BlizzCon, the biggest competition that we had in the last year. He won the Season 2 finals at Gamescom. Bomber is the type of player that you expect to be on top of the entire scene. He has been pretty much since 2010, 2011. So if Bomber loses in the quarterfinals, and it's not even just the fact that he lost in the quarterfinals against Alicia, with all due respect, a very good player, but not as successful as Bomber has been in the past, even though he got really close and has deep runs as well. It's like, it's not just the fact that he lost in the quarterfinals, but it's also the way he lost. Bomber's play in Season 1 of WCS didn't feel like, hey, here is this badass Terran from Code S who switched to WCS America, who's here to win it all. No, he played below Bomber's level.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to describe it. When I think about Bomber's play in that last season, what immediately comes to mind, I just remember, because we have a TVT, of course, to kick things off here, was his TVT against Pol. And it really didn't look like it was Bomber playing at all. Just a completely different guy showed up. And, you've been telling me you're feeling confident about Bomber's play. I'm hoping that he can bring it up to, what we kind of expect out of him being the successful player that he is moving into today's matches.
Yeah, as it wasn't just the quarterfinals where he lost last season. In the round of 32, he dropped the series against Arthur. Also not something we would expect. In the round of 16, he went up against Polt. And losing against Polt is one thing. Like, hey, that could happen to the best of us. But just the way that he lost, it was decisive. It was one-sided. It didn't feel like a very impressive performance by Bomber in the end, and you would almost even say that it was a miracle that he even made it to the quarterfinals. However, I recently had the pleasure of casting a lot of games from him at the Lone Star Clash. He finished third in that competition. He lost against Pold again, but he played so much better than he did in WCS America Season 1. He really looked like a man on fire. I think he should have won 4 out of the 5 games that he played against Pold. A couple of small throws, but he won some decisive games, and he lost very close ones where he was ahead, but he kind of derped a little bit. Either way, I think we're going to see a very strong Bomber this season, and obviously he's a big favorite on paper. Either way, it seems like our players are super ready, so I don't want to really stall this out too much longer. But of course, before we jump into our first game, please, guys, let us know, what do you expect? Are you looking forward to Bomber? Do you think that he's going to go much further this season? Reach out to us, #WCS, and of course, follow us at ESLTV and at StarCraft. Nate, we've been talking a lot about Bomber. I'm sure that we can talk quite a bit about MaSa as well. Of course, he's a really interesting Terran player as well.
Yeah, MaSa is a really cool guy. I was actually watching some of the games that they were playing last night, just getting ready for this group. And MaSa is one of those players that you don't see a lot at live tournaments, almost ever. He's played very well online. I remember he had a good showing in the Ender's Game tournament, ended up winning, I think, one half of the tournament, and then facing off against Minigun in the grand final. So this is his opportunity to get to the round of 16 for the first time in WCS America, get to the live stage and really have a chance to make that online performance, because for the most part he is relatively unknown on that bigger scale of tournament results.
Yeah, it's so silly because like we can't really call MaSa an unknown anymore. He's been around for quite a while. I would almost say that among the North Americans, he's been rated of one of the best Terrans on the server for, I would say, at least a year, but probably closer to 18 months or even closer to almost 2 years by now. But still, he's not a player that streams a whole lot. He's not a player that participates in a whole lot of online tournaments. He's not a player that travels. So that kind of makes you talk about him like he's an unknown. Well, we know better because we had the pleasure of casting him a couple of times, and I can guarantee you, if you play against some top NA players, they will all say MaSa is very, very good. Even though, that all aside, Bomber, of course, still the favorite on paper. Either way, as you guys can see behind us, the game is live already. Let's just go ahead and jump into our very first game, which is going to be played on the way station.
A very cool map. The first time we're seeing this in WCS America Premier League. And of course, well, in the bottom left position, our first Terran player here is showing up for Root Gaming. It is the underdog, MaSa. And he making one of his first potential chances to get into that round of 16 for WCS, of course. This guy's no stranger to success in WCS or any tournament. We have the Red Bull sponsored Terran player. In the red, it is Bomber.
That tongue twister, Nate, that early tongue twister. The red Terran sponsored by Red Bull.
Hey.
Double red. DR. Dr. Bomber.
Dr. Bomber.
Either way, I'm really excited to see Bomber today. Like I said before, he's been a Korean that has really grown a lot on me. He's been around for a long time, and he has a lot of fans in the foreign scene, and well-deserved, not just for his amazing games, but he's always been a cool dude. But lately, I had the chance of like meeting him a little more as well, and you know, there are a lot of Koreans that I'm friendly with whenever I travel to the tournaments, and you know, you talk with them. But most of the time, it's like you reach out to them, you know, you try to talk with them. Bomber, he's the opposite. Bomber is the type of guy that walks up to you and he's like, hey, how are you doing? What are you watching? It's like, you know, you're watching some of the games on the screen, and he just sits down next to you and he starts discussing the game. So it's like, wow, what a cool dude Bomber is. So he's really grown a lot on me, and I was happy to see him play as well as he did at Lone Star. I think if it would have gone just slightly different, and Way Station, ironically enough, was one of the games which he really could have won against Paul, but he ended up losing. He could have even perhaps win the entire thing. I think he would have done very well in the finals against Jaedong. Maybe not win it. Either way, as I said many times, I really think we're going to see a super strong Bomber this season.
Yeah, and already we're seeing the opening folds of this game reveal themselves with the build orders. MaSa is going for a very fast factory in his base, up against the Reaper expand, it would look to be from Bomber. Of course, Reaper's on a map like Way Station. A lot of the new maps added in Season 2 don't have cliff areas that you can go up with Reapers, but this map we especially see this cliff on these spawns. These are the two sets of spawns you can get. This is about as short a rush distance as you're going to get on these new maps, and because of that, you can scout a bit more easily, but you'll need to be careful as whatever early aggression MaSa goes for will be able to reach his base quite fast as well.
Interesting little SCV on patrol over here after it went into the main base. So this Reaper is making his way across the map. There's a second Reaper on the way for Bomber as well. That's kind of interesting. It's a double Reaper fast expand. What do you take away from this, Knight?
I mean, making two Reapers isn't too out of the ordinary. If your opponent also opens Reaper and you just build one and go into Reactor, then you can get into a really weird position where if they go two Reapers and you don't, you're behind. Picks off one of MaSa's Marines, but I like that he left the SCV at the natural. He can confirm the command center is there, and also that SCV would not have been able to escape from the Reaper if he ran straight back to his base anyway, so he can do a little bit of poking. The Reaper will kill him, but he kind of knows what his opponent's up to, and MaSa's getting his starport. He already has a second gas. This looks like a textbook Banshee opener from the Root Terran player, and this is pretty much standard par for the course in this matchup at the moment.
Oh, this is interesting, by the way. This is really well done by MaSa. It feels like he almost knew that this was coming. He sent the Marines to the right side, and now with that Hellion coming in from the left side, he was able to trap one of these Reapers of Bomber. Normally a unit that you're just not supposed to kill in this phase in the game. A really cute Marine movement, and this just shows you guys that you can do so much with so little. In this case, just 2 Marines. But getting a unit kill that you're not supposed to kill, that is amazing.
Yeah, what's really important now is how Bomber takes the next couple of seconds of this game. He hasn't started really like, yes, he doesn't have like a scan yet. He doesn't have an engineering bay on the map. He saw the factory with his initial Reaper poke, and he has his starport on the way. But Bomber does not have all of the defense ready. Now the engineering bay is underway, and you know, this is, we've seen players like Polt go up to like maybe 2-3 missile turrets, but MaSa still has these couple Marines and Hellions up front, so he wants to move whatever anti-air that Bomber has around the map. And these 2 Hellions that come out should be enough, since one of MaSa's Hellions is quite weak, but this is still an okay defensive position for Bomber.
Yeah, it is, but it's also because MaSa didn't see what we saw. Actually, Bomber had to really buy time there, and for the full 30 seconds, he was left with just a single Reaper. If MaSa would have picked up that ramp, that would have been very annoying for Bomber. He would have probably been forced to pull some SCVs, and he would have been losing quite a few SCVs regardless. Right now, he was actually able to get enough time for, buy enough time for himself because MaSa didn't know what we knew, and he got out 4 Hellions. This Banshee is going to be a tiny bit annoying, but there is a missile turret going up in the natural, and there is also one in the main base. Unfortunate there for MaSa that he didn't see what we saw, because he could have done a lot more there.
Yeah, this is the really nice part for Bomber, this counterattack. Picks off the SCV, constructing this command center. And, you know, MaSa's Banshee doesn't really kill much. He forced out 2 missile turrets, the engineering bay, burns a scan. Might be able to burn another scan with the way that this Banshee is headed. It's still alive in Bomber's base. Hellions have poked the front. He's managed to secure his natural expansion. But if this Banshee manages to kill something like this reactor or force out another scan, the mineral investment for the eBay in those 2 missile turrets is still pretty substantial to deal with it. Banshee almost always gets some form of damage done.
You could really see Bomber wanting to wait. He's like, that Banshee should be out of energy real soon. I'm going to wait, I'm going to wait. He's like, my reactor is running way too low on HP right now, so he threw down the scan in the long run. Still, that little counterattack by Bomber was successful as well, as he stalled this command center. He picked up an SCV. Overall, this went well for Bomber, but it could have gone a lot worse. This is the 3rd scan already, though. That's quite a bit. Then again, I would almost say that you can scan all day, every day, as long as you're in 2 orbitals and your opponent is on 1. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, the thing is, though, like, he's secured his natural, and these Hellions are still running in as well, managing to pick up another SCV before it can actually finish off. You know, not having that second mule is actually quite nice. Even though Bomber's losing, you know, resources on the turret, on the scans, he's up a reasonable number of SCVs, about 8 it seems. Might lose his tech lab, but he still has everything in place he needs to move on once this is over. This is still really good use of the Banshees to be as annoying as possible, though.
Yeah, he forced out a couple of scans, but he's still down 8 workers. He is up in units right now, though, so maybe he could try to go for a small counter with his Hellions as soon as he repairs them. But he doesn't really seem to be prioritizing that. And I kind of forgot about these Vikings, but the Vikings in this phase in the game on the ground were actually really useful as well. So overall, after we went through the madness that is the early game in TVT, and there's one more Banshee. This is the 3rd Banshee already, isn't it?
Yeah, this is something that we usually see a lot of Korean players try to do. You know, and I think about players that will go for more than 1 Banshee. It's players like Maru, like players that are really try to be aggressive as possible, and he still gets a good amount of use out of it. Somehow this thing's already managed to get 5 kills. He's picked off those SCVs that were building those barracks. You can delay that production a little bit. It's quite nice, and he actually has a medevac headed towards the main base on the left side with 4 Hellions. One great thing about Way Station is a lot of space for these flying units to dodge around, and even though there's 2 Vikings and a Raven in the main of Bomber, he can still slip by that, and if those 4 Hellions unload, things get tough because the Banshee's going to hit the natural expansion as well. Hold position right outside the range of that missile turret.
Yeah, MaSa is going to lose his medevac pretty much immediately, but how many SCVs will he be able to take down in the process? So far he's getting a couple of really juicy shots off. It took a while before these Hellions from Bomber made their way into the main base. Wow, Bomber is actually losing a lot of SCVs over here. Yeah,
and at the same time, MaSa has already picked off even a supply depot with a few SCVs at the natural expansion. So this is just really good, annoying plays so far. MaSa has also completed his stim upgrade in the midst of all of this. Bomber still about 20 seconds left to go. Combat shield is on the way. One thing that's important to note, Bomber will have his +1 attack faster, and when it comes to Marine versus Marine, every single upgrade has a huge impact on fights.
I must say I'm a little bit surprised by how much damage it did in the long run. Like in the start I felt that Bomber had a reasonable read on this, and even though he lost a few SCVs here and there, he was still up like 8-9 workers, and that's pretty substantial. You know, that's enough to really get yourself in a favorable position in 1 or 2 minutes from this phase in the game. I don't know what's going on over here. Why did he skill his own missile turret?
I think it was just hindering his mining. He's probably not concerned about Banshees anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it a couple of times because it's in front of the close mineral patch. So.
But like normally, if he would build it over here, it shouldn't be an issue, right?
Yeah, it must just be Bomber not wanting to miss out on any potential mining time. He's got a big push coming up here from MaSa, though, and this is still relatively scary, but without air control, MaSa can't really push the issue. That Banshee, still alive, sneaks into the main base on the right side of the mineral line. That is incredibly annoying. He can't attack the front, but he's going to force the Vikings to come back, and it's still just really, really annoying. He even gets how many more kills? Geez, 24 total this game.
Yeah, so it got 3 additional kills over here. Now eventually it will fall. I'm really impressed with how MaSa is playing this so far. He's playing a very clean Terran versus Terran so far. It's almost like he's putting up a clinic of how to play effectively. I like this little push that he was going for as well. He had the tank advantage, but of course it's really hard to attack into siege tanks. So most likely Bomber will still be able to stabilize and buy time for himself. But during all this, MaSa is ahead by 7 SCVs right now, and he is the Terran with map control. He has more tanks. Now, actually, the tank count is even right now. We do see 2 Marauders in the mix for Bomber. No Marauders on the field just yet for MaSa, but that's pretty much the only difference.
Oh, MaSa setting up a big drop inside of the main base. There's already a good number of Marines preemptively set up. Will pick off one of the tanks and both of those medevacs quite fast. Tank siege on the low ground, but there's not really much here for MaSa to look to kill. He's not in range of anything more than that initial supply depot. And these Marines, they're pretty much just tank fodder now.
Yeah, good building positioning over here by Bomber. It's probably something that he's aware of. He's going to drop some Seeker missiles as well, forcing these tanks to relocate. One of these tanks will get blown up, and Bomber defended this extremely well. So MaSa, despite everything that he did early on, that went so well for himself, this definitely kind of backfired. And well, this is just kind of how we know Bomber. Suddenly there's a large army marching across the map, which MaSa should be able to deal with, even though he's down quite a bit in army supply. He's actually down 25 army supply. Do you think Bomber is going to try to YOLO this and just straight up win?
This could be a very nice time to hit for Bomber. +1/1 is on the way for MaSa, but Bomber's +1 armor just finished. He's a full upgrade ahead on both armor and attack. He's just moving straight on in. These Marines destroy MaSa's forces. The siege tanks all obliterated. Bomber moving into the natural expansion. MaSa does not seem to have anything left. 2 tanks inside of his main base. One of them actually caught in between all the production, and he's just can't do anything. GG. Bomber takes game number 1. And that was a very well-executed counterattack. Bomber, I think, especially with the upgrades, even trading with they had a similar number of Marines and tanks, but some of those extra units, the Marauders you pointed out, he still had a couple of his Hellions from the early game. Good, cute harass from MaSa, but Bomber just handled that initial attack so well.
Yeah, do you think MaSa got a little overeager after he did so well for himself? Because like he wasn't really in a position where I felt like he had to do something. Because from that point on, he was out mining Bomber. Upgrades, he was a little bit behind, but it wasn't really the end of the world. Nothing that he wouldn't be able to overcome. I kind of felt that the ball was in Bomber's corner to make something happen, but for some reason it felt like MaSa really wanted to push the issue. Bomber with those Marines, of course, if those Marines are not in the main base on that moment, we're looking at a completely different game, because then MaSa is able to siege up in the main as well, and that attack is going to be so much more successful, and we might be the first one applauding MaSa for that crack, but it felt like he was perhaps a little too overeager trying to make something happen when it wasn't really his time to do that.
I think in a situation like that, MaSa, we kind of talked about, he had a little bit of an economic lead from all the workers that he killed. I don't think it's a bad time to scan. If you scan the main base, you see that many Marines are there. Like, while that attack was going on, like, he had so many Marines, he was repositioning all of his tanks, but he only had a few siege tanks in his natural. That could be one of those times where, you would YOLO into the natural, because with only 3 tanks, if he spreads his Marines and then sieges his tanks behind it, he could lock down the ramp, and then Bomber has to funnel all of his units running out of the main base. So it's a tricky situation. I think just a scan or 2 might have been able to help MaSa, but I can see why he would try that, since he might have felt really far ahead after all the damage he did. But also during those early trades, that +1 attack for Bomber gives him a little bit more fighting power to defend as well.
Yeah, it was a cool game though. MaSa definitely played very well, because very early game I felt like, oh, okay, I'm not sure how this is going to shape up. But then I really loved the small Marine movement, because that kind of snowballed already. Like, those 2 Reapers, they were extremely important thing for Bomber in that phase in the game. He wants his Reapers out on the map. He wants to at least be safe, because those 2 Reapers are also buying time for him to, get that reactor ready on the Rex, which he didn't build any Marines from, and then switch it up with the factory. And suddenly he's trapped with only a single Reaper against 2 Hellions, even though one was really low in HP, and 2-3 Marines. I think if MaSa would have tried to pick up the ramp in that phase in the game, it would have been very good for him. But obviously he can't.
Yeah, I mean, when I try to think about it from from MaSa's perspective, yeah, it's like, maybe if he only has 1 Reaper, I can do damage, but if those 2 Hellions are out, then you lose everything. You take the first initial volley, everything's clumped up. But yeah, there was definitely a couple of opportunities that that would have been nice to take claim. So we're gonna move on to Frost for our second map.
I was already worried that we didn't have Frost first map. I was like, what's going on over here? Did these players break the gentleman's agreement? That would be terrible. But I'm happy to see that Frost is going to be our second map. We are ready. The game is live, so we can just go ahead and jump into our next game. As MaSa is we can see behind us. That's cool. I like that. Nice. Excellent use of the video screen. Shout out to the guy who came up with that idea. Who came up with that idea?
Production value, man. All right, in the bottom left position, we've got the blue Terran player from Root Gaming down 0-1 in this best of 3. It is MaSa doing some adventurous Marine dropping in the first map, but his opponent just played solid through and through in the top right. Sponsored by Red Bull, it is Bomber. And Bomber, I don't think that build that he did is something that, you know, that's not something that you want to hide or keep secret. That's a very solid standard build. You can pretty much do it on any map. MaSa's build, however, gas first is a style that a lot of Terran players like, but on a larger map like this, you don't have as much space to move a Banshee around the outside of the main, like on Way Station. You might see him go towards something a bit more economy focused, and as I say that, he takes his gas anyway.
It could still be a little bit more economy focused, so maybe it's just for a quick Reaper, and after that he's going to expand.
He could go earlier Hellions. I think this is a good map if you want to do like a fast Hellion drop with some Marines. Banshee can still work, but there's, like I said, the only reason I say that is there's just less space overall.
Yeah,
some Terran players do gas first in any map, and MaSa is that kind of player. But
Even the rush distance, like obviously we would have had different spawning locations on Way Station, then that map is larger than for us.
Yeah.
But in this situation with the previous spawning location that we had, it's going to be it's going to take quite a bit of extra time for your Banshees to make their way across the map than what we had in the previous map. So it's unlikely we're going to see the same crazy Banshee madness from MaSa that we saw in game number 1.
Yeah, and you know, Bombers opted to go for what appears to be it's a very late 15 gas. So this is something that's kind of like the Reaper expand, except you just don't have the Reapers. So your initial gas goes straight into the factory. You still get the same setup where you end up on a reactored factory most of the time. You get a couple extra Marines out earlier on, which can help in defending against a Banshee. I think MaSa opening up with this build as the underdog in this series just shows this is probably his most comfortable and most practiced style. He doesn't really care what map he's put on at this point. Maybe an Altazine, but I doubt we're going to see that map pop up in almost any series.
I would hope so. Every now and then we see Altazine. It doesn't happen often, but whenever we see, sometimes it brings out something beautiful.
I just remember the statistics that they were like the WCS Europe players are much more comfortable playing on that map with like when they compared how many maps got vetoed.
Because we have more Zergs in WCS Europe. That's my guess. Even though they used to be very Protoss dominated as well. Either way, we see the command center first, or not, sorry, the command center follow up for Bomber going down over here. So that late gas, as you said, is just going to go straight into the factory. SV went in on a suicide mission, but they did get the confirmation that there were 2 Marines, and he also saw the command center. And when the command center goes down at this time, and you see that amount of Marines, you can pretty much put the pieces in the right place and know there is a refinery up and running as well.
Yeah, it's a very, very standard build that pops up. One Barracks fast expand, just not really as popular, though. It looked like he might have gone for that with how late the gas was taken. So he's getting his own factory. So the way that Bomber has done this, it's most likely just goes right to the starport. I'm almost surprised to see him not taking his second gas yet. Maybe he just wants to get a Viking and an engineering bay if it is Banshees again, which it looks to be from MaSa as he has his second gas. He moves the starport over to the tech lab. And I like how MaSa also gets a very fast reactor on his factory, so his Marine production can immediately shoot up after he pays for Cloak in the Banshee.
I'm a little bit surprised to see this opening again by MaSa. Not that there's anything wrong with it, because Cloak Banshee has been solid pretty much since day 1 of Wings of Liberty. It fell out of fashion for a while until we decided to, or at least Blizzard decided to make the Cloak upgrade a little bit cheaper again. And after that, it's one of the openings that you see almost any Terran bust out in any best of 5, at least on in one of the maps, and sometimes on multiple maps. But after it went on Way Station, I kind of felt that the Banshees did as well if they could have possibly done, and in the end it wasn't enough. I feel like it's hard to imagine they're going to be that successful again this time on Frost.
Yeah, it's really weird, because if MaSa feels, you know, confident enough that he can do similar damage, that's great. His build already looks infinitely more aggressive than the last map. He's already producing siege tanks behind these Marines. He cannot afford to get a command center. So what I imagine MaSa wants to do is he says, my Banshee control was good last game. I feel confident enough that I can probably get some damage done. Maybe I'll expand behind my push, but a very fast siege tank Marine Banshee push is probably one of the hardest builds to stop in the game if you open up Hellions like Bomber did on the last map. He could be looking to punish it again. Bomber has a tech lab on the way on his factory. A fast siege tank or 2 could help shut this down, but it's also going to come down to having scans, missile turret positioning, and denying damage from this initial Banshee.
Yeah, MaSa already marching across the map, taking control of the northern Zelnaga watchtower. We do see a command center going down on the production tab right now, but it's very late. There were 4 SCVs, by the way, on this mineral line, so now Bomber is actually going to be able to see that, and he will still be able to fix this as well. There's also a Widow Mine over here. I'm sure MaSa is so crowded. He's going to fly into the Widow Mine. That's pretty sick.
Yeah, very nice grab. And I really like that Bomber's using these 2 Widow Mines as well. There's no Raven on the map. These Marines, the second Widow Mine, okay, so MaSa splits 1 Marine off. This guy will die a horrible death, but he'll do it for the team. So he won't take the splash damage on the rest of his forces. But Bomber already has a tank out. There's the scan, and MaSa could try to bum rush this tank, but once it sieges up, yeah, there's not much he can do. Next Banshee moves in. If he could kill it, that would be nice. But scan from Bomber. Banshee is still up. There's a bit more potential here. Does he have any scans left? No, not yet. So this could still do something.
Yeah, but there are 2 Vikings in the mix. I don't think there's... Okay, this Banshee has a little bit of a life ahead of himself. The missile turret is just halfway done, so it can be annoying. But I feel that Bomber is going to have more than enough units here in the long run to survive. And is still right on that economic advantage that he has.
Yeah, I think it's just MaSa trying to get his money's worth for this investment. I mean, he's taken a big chunk out of this command center. Another scan gets burned by Bomber to pick that off. And you know, at the very least, the Banshee confirms the tech lab researching stim for Bombers. He knows, okay, at the very, very basics, I know that he's going bio, so I got a little information before the Banshee was picked off. And MaSa's 3rd command center is actually so much earlier than anything for Bomber. We could still see him try to use some sort of early economic advantage to push the mid game.
Yeah, I'm kind of worried for MaSa though, because now this is just a typical Bomber game where I see that Bomber defends a push, or at least a small push, and then we know that when his production truly kicks in, he's going to march across the map and do what Bomber does best, and that's most of the time just win with his first real attack. If you take a look at Stim, it's so far ahead. There's no way that Bomber is just going to sit back for the longest amount of time. He hasn't checked the main base of MaSa once, but the moment that he sees this, he knows that there's going to be a window where he's going to have way more units than MaSa. Because even though the worker tab looks kind of even, it was quite a while that Bomber had 2 orbitals and MaSa did not. And sure, a few scans went down, but even MaSa threw down 1 or 2 scans as well in that entire process. I'm kind of worried for MaSa. He's going to have to be defensive for a very long amount of time and somehow not take any damage of whatever Bomber is going to throw at him.
Yeah, it's interesting because Bomber, once again, we see he's getting that earlier +1 attack, and MaSa had an engineering bay earlier on. But MaSa already actually has the reactors on his barracks. Bomber still has 1 naked barracks. He has the second one finishing a reactor right now. So the production capabilities are actually even since Bomber hasn't added on any additional tech. He needs to do a little bit more, I think, with what he has. And these 2 medevacs moving out to drop could do a lot. If MaSa defends this, then having that 3rd command center and equal production could put him in a really sweet spot. Bomber's now adding on the 4th and 5th barracks, but MaSa still has enough, I think, to defend the initial harass if he scouts it.
This little Marine over here on the south side is going to be extremely important, because if he does scout it, if this 1 Marine does spot these 2 medevacs, and it definitely looks like that is going to happen, that is going to help MaSa so much, because he has 4 Vikings, guys. He went 4 Vikings before medevacs, so he can shut these medevacs from Bomber down as well, as he knows that Bomber was going to have access to this just a little bit quicker. And this 1 Christopher Columbus Marine does indeed scout these medevacs. Here come the Vikings, 2 Vikings right now, soon to be 4 Vikings. And this is, you know, a board mission for Bomber. Very well done by MaSa. That 1 Marine, worth its weight in gold.
Oh yeah, killing the medevac and also 5 Marines that were inside of it, basically neutralizing all of his harass. And MaSa still has Marines on both 3rd bases of Bomber. He knows that Bomber hasn't expanded beyond this. We know as observers that Bomber has no 3rd command center. This looks like we're going to see, with this push, possibly the end of the game. Bomber is down on supply.
He's down on everything.
He needs to make something happen with this push because he's up against 3 command centers. And once MaSa's additional barracks finish, once he gets equalized production, that's pretty much he's going to have such an economic lead that it'll be very difficult to stop him from snowballing. Bomber's push has to do something.
Look at this, Nathan. MaSa has way more Marines. He has 10 additional Marines. He has 2 more siege tanks. He has more Vikings. The only thing that he's not up in is medevacs. I'd be extremely surprised if Bomber somehow is able to make magic work with this, because that just wouldn't make any sense at all.
Starts the 3rd command, so better late than never in this situation.
But never late is better, Nate.
I mean, it's hard to know sometimes what MaSa could have been doing. It's really scary in TVT when you think about if MaSa was also playing 2 bases, then maybe Bomber takes a bit of a risk by going for a 3rd. So I can kind of see why he would do this. He starts his armory up, so we're definitely going to see later upgrades. Another important thing to point out, +1 armor will still finish a bit faster for Bomber, so in direct engagements with lots of Marines, still could look strong. Total Marine count is actually very close. A couple siege tank lead for MaSa, but the numbers are still small enough that a fight could go either way.
And of course, he's going to have control of this Zelnaga Watchtower, the Sunderin one, if he keeps his tanks over here. And that's always going to make things a little tricky. He's picking up everything right now, I don't think that this is the moment where you normally would expect a Doom drop. I definitely didn't expect it, but it seems like MaSa's gonna, or Bomber's gonna try to go for it. MaSa has units in reasonable positions. If this one medevac finds everything, that would be so sick. It's gonna be really close.
Yeah, this medevac is going to be seen by the Vikings. He has Vikings of his own on the south. He has a few missile turrets. Can MaSa defend? He's stimming his Marines, running back towards the main base as fast as he can. Missile turrets take a couple shots. Medevac's getting hit by these Vikings, but most of the army does unload here for Bomber. Will it be enough? The Marines coming, the SCVs. He's bringing everything in a fantastic spread from MaSa. Surrounds and destroys the entire force so far. The tank siege on the outside of the main base also helping. He loses a good number of SCVs in the process. Some of the Marines accidentally loaded into MaSa's medevacs, but defends that push without losing any critical structures, finds himself up 40 supply and floating this third command center out, and Bomber's army out front being repelled by MaSa's Marines.
Yeah, well done there by MaSa. I think it helped so extremely much that that one medevac spotted that entire medevac fleet from Bomber. In situations like this, 1 or 2 seconds can make the absolute difference between either crushing a push or barely stabilizing or actually just dying to it. Because imagine if Bomber is actually sieged up over here with a bunch of tanks and all these Marines have to run in.
Moves in a good chunk of Marines, just snipes the third command center of MaSa. A huge loss. And, you know, MaSa was positioned defensively nice, but when you go to take your third like this, you can't take a third in TVT without asserting map control. And even the building layout, this engineering bay, and MaSa's natural keeps all his siege tanks from leaving his base. They're stuck.
Where?
In the right side.
Oh my god. Do you think he knows?
That's a painful thing. I think he's realizing that they're stuck, but I don't think he realizes what. He needs to kill the engineering bay. Or lift with the medevacs, I guess.
I think the eBay would really suck. Either way, we have 4 medevacs right now on the north side of the map over here for MaSa. Bomber has absolutely no map awareness. He's sending 1 Marine to the north side right now. It would be absolutely ridiculous if this one little hero Marine is going to see these 4 north medevacs. He does catch the glimpse of one of them. I'm not sure if he saw that in time. Is he rallying anything to the corner of his base? He's throwing up a sensor tower, so right now he knows Bomber is rallying 2 medevacs over here as well. This is a pretty successful drop for MaSa, I think.
MaSa attacking his own siege tank with some of these Marines, so actually gets rid of most of its health, but the drop does land. He's sending a big force to that third base of Bomber. At the same time, Bomber brings all his Marines in. He's forced the army out of position. Can he take advantage of this at the third base? Takes a big chunk out of the Marines by the third. Vikings have air control. The Marines and tanks are still inside of Bomber's production, but this is he needs a little bit more MaSa here because Bomber killing that third base sets him back a bit. Bomber's +2 attack is done as well. These Marines are going to take great trades head to head, but he has to get these units out of his production. How is he supposed to move anything out? GG.
GG. MaSa takes game number 2 over Bomber after an excellent game on Frost. He played very well over there, and I feel like every time that a player seems to be in a reasonable position, they get a little overeager in this series. And right now, Bomber, I don't think he had to go for that drop, especially not after he saw that medevac flying and spotting all his medevacs. Even though sometimes you already have it in mind and you think it might be a good idea, I think if you give any player as good as MaSa the time to react to something like this, even if you just give him a bonus, like I said before, he lost that third command to 3 or 4 seconds. It makes so much of a difference. Like, these Marines were already stimming, were already on the corner, and by the time that Bomber was really sieged up, there were already stimmed Marines, like, in range of all of his units, and that's what you don't want to have when you drop like that.
It really, the awareness comes down to everything. Just imagine, because we saw Bomber's Marine barely catch a glimpse of one of those medevacs, and if he rallies all the Marines straight to the top of his base, if he has, brings a couple of his tanks back, maybe he has enough to shut it down or at least kill some of the Marines as they're coming out of the medevacs. But that was just a situation where MaSa exploited a very small hole in Bomber's armor perfectly, and because of that, when we have a tied series right now, we're going to play the final game on Overgrowth for this TVT, and this has been a pretty good series so far. I'm loving it.
Yeah, it's really weird as well, because I felt that Bomber shouldn't have been, like, I felt like the game was going quite okay for him, but suddenly it looked like he was quite far behind. Like, when he walked across the map, I expected him to be at least up in something, and the only thing that he was truly up in were medevacs, which, as nice as it is, and he tried to make something happen with that first drop, and of course, if those first 2 medevacs with Stim Marines are effective, then we're looking at a different game as well. But all props to MaSa for spreading his Marines out early on. That's just the thing you want to do when you play some TVTs.
Yeah, that was really good. And, you said in the very early stages of the game, maybe even we perhaps underestimated how much damage that Banshee really did. He built, like, missile turrets that were being canceled in the mineral line. That command center took a lot of damage, and It was really crazy to see that he got the third command center and
Yeah.
both, like all three barracks with the reactors
Yeah.
faster than Bomber could. But
Yeah, that was definitely the thing I was most surprised by, that he was getting his third command set, and even though his upgrades were a little ready. How did you feel, by the way, while the game is live, as you guys can see behind us, so we can just go ahead and jump into game. I thought it was also quite smart by MaSa that he said, like, hey, on this moment, I don't really have the Marine count that I need, and above all, I don't even have Stim yet. My opponent probably does have Stim. I'm just going to open up with 4 Vikings before I start building medevacts. I don't think this is something that I personally see very often in TVT, but maybe you can enlighten me on this fact.
I mean, anybody that plays Terran on the ladder, especially, you know that there are so many crazy builds you can do, so many timings you can try to hit off 1 or 2 bases with either a fast medevac, a counter Banshee, even Ravens in some weird circumstances, that having early air control, or at least some form of air superiority when you don't have map control, is very, very nice in order to either at least like shut down a medevac so you can kill what's on the ground. There's a lot of different weird attacks, and I think, yeah, I don't disagree with the choice to build Vikings at the beginning, especially with the damage that he did.
It turned out fantastic. Like, it was, without a shadow of a doubt, it was the right choice. Otherwise, those 2 medevacs full of Marines could have actually caused quite a bit of a problem. Could have slowed everything down for MaSa. His economy could have taken a hit. Either way, we are looking at game number 3 over here on Overgrowth, as of course the red Terran spawning on the left bottom side of the map, representing Red Bull, is Bomber.
Yes, sir, Bomber. We're going with the gas first this game. He's taking MaSa's build, and well, MaSa from Root Gaming is our blue Terran player in the top right, who has this game opted for a barracks into what looks like with that rally from the command center, it's going to be a 15 gas, a bit sharper of a 15 gas timing than Bomber in the last map. So I expect to see 2 Marines, probably a reactor, and then he'll most likely move after about 6 Marines into a fact. You'll see some Hellion play from him, some cool stuff from MaSa. Bomber, I got to imagine if he's doing this, it's probably going to be that Banshee play, although he does have the option to do something along the lines of a fast Hellion Marine drop.
You know, in the old days, we often talked about underrated foreigners or who we think deserved more love. I don't think there's anyone ever been flying under the radar as much as MaSa did. Like, it seems to be like a North American thing, because even the Major doesn't play that much in the spotlight. Lately he started streaming a little more, and his stream is awesome. There are Pokemons dancing all over his screen. So if you're into that, you should definitely check out Juanito's stream. But it's really funny because no one ever really mentions MaSa when you talk about one of the best players in North America. But every single time we do cast him or we do see him play, he puts up a stunning performance. As you said, he won one part of that Endless Game Invitational, made it all the way to the final. That is impressive on its own, because all the good North Americans were participating in that tournament. And even right now, you know, you just see him taking game of Bomber like, it's nothing.
Yeah, I think there's it's one of the cool things that I've been liking about WCS, because we got to see another underrated Terran last season in Neeb. But MaSa, we've known about him a bit longer, I would say, than even Neeb. And this series is definitely a big chance. It's mostly that we haven't seen guys like MaSa in these offline tournaments. This game so far, still a very similar setup from Bomber to the last game that MaSa did, except he hasn't taken the second gas. So if he goes for Banshee, he won't be able to get Cloak, but maybe he can still do some fast Marine Hellion pressure with a Banshee that has no Cloak.
I wouldn't be super shocked either to see Bomber, even though he has money right now, so he's probably going to drop a command center immediately, to see Bomber do some quick push on a map like Overgrowth. That just kind of seems like in the line of how I know Bomber as well. Whenever you think like, oh, Bomber just lost the game, I kind of wonder how he recovers from this, and he just stays so incredibly cool, makes a couple of siege tanks and just runs across the map and goes for a super early contain when his opponent isn't ready yet. So far that's not the case, as we see the first Banshee's on the way and the command center is on the way as well, but Bomber could still surprise us and follow this up with something funky.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting the way that Bomber's laid his base out with the positioning of that barracks and factory. In the event that he was being hit with any type of fast reactor Hellion or, you know, Hellion Reaper poking, see lots of players try to push early on if they do open with that fast reactor on the factory. But this, of course, keeps him safe. And the nice thing about this cloakless Banshee is whether or not it does any damage, there will be a Viking from MaSa, but MaSa's already building missile turrets, he got an engineering bay. So without investing into Cloak, he still forces the same response that Bomber has had to do in the last 2 games with multiple missile turrets potentially, and of course the Viking.
I do feel that this Banshee is most likely going to be a little less effective though than any of the Banshees that we've seen so far. This is bad luck Brian, the Banshee, you know, he didn't get a special upgrade from Mommy. No cloak for him, and he's gonna fly into a Viking, into a bunch of Marines, and there's a missile turret waiting for him as well. So I think the best that he could hope for is picking up this SUV, stalling the command center. Maybe after that, pick it off one more time if he's somehow able to shake this Viking off his tail. But I don't think that's ever going to happen. So.
No, I like that Bomber's actually getting this Raven. He did not see anything that was actually inside the base of MaSa aside from the command center. So whether or not this Banshee escapes, MaSa is going into a little bit of a later Cloak Banshee attack. And sometimes late Cloak Banshee pushes in TVT are really good because it's past the time where you'd normally try to prepare for it. So Bomber may not have an engineering bay, but he already does have a missile turret, as we know that he has that, and he also will have a Raven. So MaSa, on the other hand, might also not really do any damage with his Banshee.
Quick tech lab over here on the factory, and I'm curious to see if Bomber is going to start producing siege tanks immediately. He did see sort of what he was playing against. He didn't see everything. Do you think that Bomber is still kind of guessing of what MaSa is aiming for exactly? Do you think he's worried about something, or is it just like, he can't have too much?
Yeah, it's a bit tricky because, right, he wants that tech lab because he needs tanks. He doesn't know if there's a siege tank push coming, so he has to build tanks. But he also wants to get stims. So we see that he ends up with 3 tech labs, and now the Banshee from MaSa shows up. That Raven is there with the Viking, but this Banshee actually does get 4-ish kills, maybe 5 now, so it's already paid off much better than Bomber's did. Of course, at the expense of getting Cloak, gets another SCV. So I'd say for the information he gets, it's quite nice. He does a little damage.
He got a much better scout off.
Yeah.
And of course, Cloak is a useful upgrade throughout the entire game as well.
He has a second Banshee coming across the map as well.
It can always be annoying, can always find a couple of tanks that are exposed if this Raven somehow dies in the next few minutes of this game. We see MaSa floating over his command center to the low ground as well. We're of course going to keep a close eye on this second Banshee over here on the left side. The worker count right now is 5 SCVs in favor of Bomber. Bomber again with a slightly quicker stim, it's 50 seconds ahead, and I believe he's 1 siege tank ahead as well. No, actually they're even in siege tanks.
Yeah, Bomber moving up much more quickly this game to that 5 barracks setup. Still does not actually put any reactors on any of his barracks, whereas MaSa is finishing up just now his 2nd and 3rd barracks. So we're seeing the shoe kind of on the other foot as far as the production capabilities go. MaSa with a couple reactors extra is nice, but this is still one of those situations where if Bomber tries to do what he did in the last game, a big 2-base push while he takes a very late 3rd, it could be very difficult for MaSa to defend. He's going to move this Banshee in on the right side and the left side at the same time. This is a really good way to punish any error in positioning as the right side does get spotted.
Yep, that Banshee is just going to fly as far away from the main base as possible, which allows his Banshee in the main base to reign free for at least a little bit. There are quite a few Marines over here. MaSa was still in range of that missile turret. I was surprised that it was revealed all the way over there. So in the end, that wasn't as successful as I thought it was going to be. But still, A for effort. Maybe we have to work on the execution.
You know, at the very least, the SCV count is much closer, 41 to 42. Obviously, he didn't get the mineral end that he would have wanted, but still reasonably okay. And when we look at the overall setups of both players, 17 to 17 Marines, 3 tanks to 3 tanks. It's okay, maybe there's a couple more Vikings for Bomber. He has the Raven. But unless we get into a situation where one of them is sieging outside the other's base, that air superiority isn't as big of a deal since there's not enough medevacs for either player to threaten any type of doom drop again.
Bomber did throw down 1 scan during all this into the main base just to see what he was truly playing against, and he saw the entire setup over here from MaSa and saw that he's pretty much doing the exact same thing. MaSa has had control of these L9 watchtowers as well for the last, I almost think, like 10 minutes in this game, so if he didn't have the Big Brother award yet, Nate, he definitely has it right now.
Yeah, and you know, the thing is, he's got all his bases covered. These medevacs moving towards the left side are nice, but he also has missile turrets in the right of his main base. He has a Viking outside his base to the right. So if any counterplay comes, he'll see it. These Marines walk up to the tower, basically get toasted instantly.
Yep, 4 more Marines are going to sim forward. They will be able to take out these Hellions. But if you just take a look at the vision of both players, it's kind of bizarre. Because normally if you would tell me who's who, I would say like, this is probably Bomber, the guy who spreads Marines out all across. Now we also know that Bomber is just like not your standard Terran. He's in general not too worried about what has supposed to be done or what you're supposed to do. He just kind of does what Bomber does. He also told me like in general he never really tries to copy anyone. He plays his own style, whatever he feels comfortable at. He picks up these 2 Hellions, but he's completely unaware of these 2 Hellions on the left side of the map. And these 2 Hellions full of Marines, they can do so much damage that from this point on, I feel that for MaSa, all that matters is just no, don't move forward, MaSa. Go back and put your tanks in a good position, because I really think that this drop can almost cripple Bomber.
Oh, I am so scared of this positioning. You said it, Roddy. This positioning for
MaSa.
He just needs to defend while this drop moves in. There come the medevacs towards the main base. 2 tanks, 8 Marines. This is enough to wipe out a mineral line and take out a wave or 2 of production if he unloads everything successfully. And he does get all the Marines out. The medevac, one of them does get picked up by that missile turret, but he's still here. And he can go for supply depots if he wants, the engineering bay, whatever. There's nothing mining in the main base. Can he hold his natural? Raven comes up, secret missile on the tank of MaSa outside the natural. The Marines are just going to run straight in for Bomber. Can MaSa defend with the tanks on the high ground? He has 2 siege tanks already pulling the SCVs. Both tanks still alive. Bomber is pushed back for now, not able to break MaSa, who's still inside his main base.
Yeah, but Bomber still has so many units as well. He still has so many tanks, picking up the majority of the Marines over here from MaSa. In the end, he finally will lose some of these tanks. But I feel one scan, I think if Bomber right now unsieges, he can probably go for it. Look at the Marine count, Nate. It's 47 Marines against 9 Marines of MaSa.
Yeah, he's cleaned up the drop in his main. He scans, he sees you have almost no Marines. It's 52 Marines for Bomber to 12 of MaSa. Using that medevac provision, picks off another tank, and Bomber's going to go for it. There's barely anything here to defend for MaSa. GG! And Bomber will advance to the winner's match here at the WCS America Premier League round of 32.
That was a great series, of course, really fun back and forward TVT series over there. But the final moments of that game, I think if you give MaSa another chance to play that out, he would definitely position himself differently. He could have been way more defensive. Like in the end, he was kind of defensive, but I feel he could have even been more defensive than that. He could have had 1 more tank on the high ground, and there should have never been a moment where he is running forward, where he's trying to take, because he did so much damage in the main base of Bomber. Like, he even picked off the engineering bay as well, and Bomber was not worried about the drop for the longest time. He fell down all the way, or fell back all the way to 30 SCVs. That is not much anymore. So all that MaSa had to do was just defend, and I felt there was a better way for him to defend than he did in the end.
Yeah, when it comes to Terran versus Terran, there's so many different ways that you can try to bring pressure in the mid-game stage. We've seen it with Bomber trying to do that 4 medevac drop, fully committed with Vikings. At that point, you can almost force a weird base trade if your opponent's army is on the map. But what MaSa really needed with just 2 medevacs, he had the power to shut down the mining, he had the power to pick off the upgrades if he really wanted to. But most importantly, he had the power to force Bomber to do something, because Bomber's army was out on the map. And that's one of those situations where, what can he do? Probably attack me. You said it. You want to be as defensive as possible. And the siege tanks were set up nice, but if they were set up preemptively, if the Marines were spread, I think that potentially this game turns out differently.
Either way, Bomber wins the first series of the day. We, of course, have a lot more StarCraft coming up for you guys, and the next series should be really fun as well. It's going to be Crank versus Nesty, but before we can show you that, we're going to head over to a very small commercial break. But after that, we'll be back, and we'll tell you guys all about the next 2 players.